I'm Jamie Adrian, and joining me today is Henry Reiff. It is Henry Reiff, excuse me. It is December 20th, 2011, and we are on the campus of McDaniel College. Thank you, Henry, for being with us today and sharing your memories.
Sure.
I'd like to get some background information first. Can you tell me when and where you were born?
Yes, I was born in 1953. I was actually born in Santa Barbara, California, and lived the first 5 years of my life in Ojai, California.
And where have you grown up?
And then I grew up in Watertown, Connecticut, where I lived from the time I was 5 till, although I really boarded at a couple of schools and in college. So I really, in many ways, I had not lived full time at home from the age of 16 on. But in 21, I moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, and lived there lived in South Louisiana for 14 years. The first 12 in New Orleans, 1 year in Baton Rouge, 1 year in Hammond, Louisiana, and then in 1989 moved here to Westminster, Carroll County. I've been here ever since.
Mm-hmm. And where did you go to college?
I did my undergraduate work at Princeton in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. And what did you study or specialize in?
My major was English literature, and I had a minor in French, which is, I'm embarrassed to say now, when we try to speak French.
And you continued your postgraduate school?
Yeah, I did all my graduate work while I was living in New Orleans, and I went to New Orleans in 1975 because I had, while I was at Princeton, I earned teaching certification as an English teacher, and was following up that as a career. And although I stopped teaching after a couple of years and actually pursued music for a while full time, which quickly led me to graduate school and trying to do something a little more, well, maybe not useful, but something that would actually put some food on the table and a roof over my head. And I wound up doing a master's in special ed, which I completed in 1980. And then a few years later had an opportunity on a fellowship to go into their doctoral program. So I have a PhD in special education from the University of New Orleans, which I earned in 1988.
And how did you get involved with music?
From a pretty young age on, I guess I remember distinctly when I was 9, I started getting very excited by the Beach Boys and really some of the early Motown sound. And I was about 10 when the Beatles hit, and that was all she wrote, and I sort of thought that's what I would want to do. When I got to New Orleans, I had started playing bass and played in a number of bands and different kinds of organizations during the entire time I lived in New Orleans.
What an awesome experience, play bass in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. On Bourbon Street at times, in strip bars at times.
Any place in New Orleans counts. What an opportunity, though. Tell me again, when did you come to McDaniel?
I came in August of 1989 to then Western Maryland College.
Mm-hmm. What interested you in the program here at McDaniel or Western Maryland at that time?
Well, I had just completed my doctorate in 1988, and I had started teaching at Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond, Louisiana. And during what became my second year there, I began to assess or maybe reassess priorities, and felt that I'd put a lot of time and effort into getting my PhD, and I was at a bit of a crossroads where I could remain in the New Orleans area, and which I loved. On Facebook, I call that my hometown. But that I would be limiting myself in terms of professional opportunities, career-wise, as an academe. So I thought it was time really at least to test the waters and start looking. And during the 88-89 year, I was looking at, started applying for some positions and got interested in a few. And Western Maryland actually came highly recommended to me by my major professor at the University of New Orleans, who actually had applied for the same position the year before that I did, and they actually didn't offer it to him, mainly because they didn't think they would have the money for him to accept, which is never a good business practice. You always make an offer, because he might have, but because he didn't get the offer, he highly recommended Western Maryland to me. He was from Baltimore originally, so that had a little bit to do with it, that he thought Carroll County is God's country, And he just said, it's a beautiful little school. You should check it out. And I did, and I was intrigued. And quite frankly, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't mean that in a bad way, but just it was almost 23. It was 23 years ago when I was thinking about this. Other than it clearly was starting to move up a career ladder, and that it would certainly represent a whole new set of challenges or continue, but give me new challenges from what I was getting at Southeastern Louisiana University.
What positions have you held here at McDaniel?
Well, I came as the coordinator of the graduate program of special education, and then I came as an assistant professor. And then over that time, after my first 5 years here, I became an assistant dean of academic affairs. I was still connected to the graduate programs, and that's also the time I became an associate professor. I remained a dean in academic affairs. I was assistant dean, then an associate dean, and then we kind of created a new position called Dean of Student Academic Life. So that was really all the same kind of position, and I held those positions for 14 years. In 2000, I became a full professor, and in 2008, I thought I was going to retire from being an administrator. At that point, I'd put in 14 years, and I had worked that out. But just at that time, we needed an interim or acting dean for our graduate professional studies. I was asked to do that. I somewhat reluctantly said, yeah, I'll do it for a year. After about 3 months, I decided that I really enjoyed it. It was very different from what I'd been doing before. I thought it really tapped into my skill set very well. It was very much a goodness of fit, I felt. So I applied for the position. At that point, I had to apply as part of the regular candidate pool. But fortunately, they decided that I was the right candidate, and so I've been the Dean of Graduate Professional Studies since 2008.
Wow, you've definitely worked your way up the ladder then, I guess, here at McDaniel. What kept you here? What kept you at this school instead of pursuing other schools, other
right? And I think
larger universities?
Yes, and I think I came, as a lot of people do when they come here, thinking this would be maybe a 3-year stop. I felt that I would dry off. I was wet behind the ears, so I'd dry off here, and then I'd be ready to go on to what I had been trained to do, which in my mind was to be at a large, probably state university, because special education typically is not huge in the private sector, although it is there. But I would go to a large institution known for its special education programs, spend most of my time doing research and writing, which I do love to do, some time teaching, and that would pretty much be my life. I think what I found at Western Maryland and then McDaniel, I guess the first word that comes to mind is community, and it was that sense of this being a really kind of special community. Was starting to feel, I think, just over the years, I felt myself more and more bonded and invested in the school, and actually part of my story is about that I became very invested in Westminster and Carroll County. The other part that really attracted me or kept me here, particularly when I became an academic dean, my primary job was I was the case manager for all students who were in significant academic difficulty. And this really tapped into my background in special education is learning disabilities. And I've even done a lot of my research, most of my research has been with young adults or adults with learning disabilities, and more specifically on the success process. I've looked at why people become successful as opposed to why they don't become successful. And I use that as my research background helped me develop programming for students who were struggling academically. So what I got a chance to do was every day I met individually with students, and I worked with students who were on their way out of here. And in the majority of cases, by the time all was said and done, they had a successful career at McDaniel. And I always felt that in many ways the greatest success stories were not the students who graduated with a 4.0, but the students who graduated with a 2.1, or in some cases a 2.01, who at earlier stages of their college career felt they were never going to make it. And I was able to play a part in that process at a very individual, student-centric, individual-focused level. And that was something, you can't take that to the bank. And it just, and it was what I've been trained to do as a special educator in so many ways. And so I think that probably connected me more than anything else.
That's a good feeling, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
What major changes have you seen in the college in your 20-some years that you've been here?
Well, I think there are, at the administrative level, I'm now working for the, let me see, for the 5th provost that I've worked, and I've worked for 3 of those provosts as a direct report. I've seen 3 different presidents. Each president brings a different style. I think the thing that more than any other, and I don't think this is superficial, is the physical nature of the campus. There are not only a lot of new buildings, but there is a lot of redesign. When I came here, the first year that I was at McDaniel, right in Western Maryland, I actually lived in one of the residence halls in McDaniel, the building, McDaniel Residence Hall. And at that time, the street, the branches off West Main Street, still ran to the student center area where there was a parking lot. Not too many years before that, that street had run all the way through campus and then had, I guess, emptied down on Pennsylvania Avenue somewhere. So over time, that's all become filled in, landscaped in really a very beautiful way, and that really ties in the college. There's a real continuity throughout the architecture and the landscaping here. So with the new buildings and a lot of the redesign, I think the place looks a lot different than it did when I first came. I don't know that it's really, I hope it's really not that different in terms of the things that I found to be really attractive and meaningful about it, and that is I think as we work on a new mission statement right now, I think the one sentence everybody agrees on is that we are a student-centered community, and I think I felt that when I was here in 1989, and I still feel that today.
Good. What would you like to see as your legacy at McDaniel when you're finished your time here?
Well, at one level, it's kind of trite because we use this as branding, but I guess I would like to be considered that I was a person who changed lives. Certainly with the undergraduates with whom I worked, in the sort of final stage or stages of my career as an administrator and in much more of a leadership and managerial role as a dean of the graduate and professional studies programs. Certainly part of my legacy I would like to, that I guess I strive to be, is that I was a good leader, and I define leadership, number one, as service. I actually trace that's the Platonic ideal in many ways. That's the reason that we should educate the elite is because they're going to be the leaders, and education should make them more humane and more understanding that they are serving the greater good. In that case, the Republic. In my case, McDaniel College, but McDaniel College is the people. I'm serving the people here, and I think that would be. I guess that is my legacy. That as a leader, he served. That would feel really good to me.
Good. So you told me earlier, you said that you really felt like you connected to Westminster and Carroll County.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your thoughts and impressions, from 20 years ago to now, what do you think?
Well, I think it's certainly it's a lot more, and this is not a word that many people are going to use here, but it's a lot more cosmopolitan by comparison than it used to be. I don't know that I would say it's a cosmopolitan community, but it's much more diverse in many ways. I mean, some of that's visible. Although I don't know that the African American population has really increased that much. Certainly on campus, we've become so much more diverse. But there is a Latino population now in Westminster. There are different Asian populations that are you're starting to get a sense of multi-generational. And I think as we become much more of a bedroom community for Baltimore, that's just brought in a lot, again, people who don't necessarily, are not quite as homogenous as at least the stereotype and pictures of Carroll County of, say, 50 years ago. I'm trying to think of sort of how I got involved with things. I've always considered myself a bit of a social activist, and as I kind of look back on things, I'll credit, in many ways, Walt Michael with starting me getting connected to the community. And in 1997, Walt and I started a band with a singer from Baltimore, Leah Gilmore, and that band is called Sang Malay, and we do what we would call traditional blues, American roots, and gospel music. Leah is a gospel singer in many ways by trade. And that got me very involved with Walt's program, Common Ground on the Hill. And I think I think I just got networked with a lot of people, and my sense of I guess finding a lot of like-minded people who were interested in, and I say social justice without having to feel like I have to apologize for that as some wacky idea. That's back to my idea of trying to serve the community. I think maybe concurrent with that, I got involved with St. Paul's United Church of Christ, and found that to be very meaningful, and felt that was there's certainly, if you look for social justice and social action in Christianity, you ought to be able to find it. And maybe those two things sort of were a launching point for me, and led to me getting involved with the Boys and Girls Club, serving on the consistory of St. Paul's. And actually it was from serving on the consistory of St. Paul's that really led me to the Boys and Girls Club, and that was really through the Shalom Zone, which is the program that's really from the United Methodist Church that the Union Street Methodist Church had embraced in the late 90s. And I was just really looking to make some connections between St. Paul's and Union Street, of sort of diversifying both our congregations by having some kind of reciprocal arrangement. And at that time, the Pastor Hinton said, well, I don't know about that, but we've got a really interesting program that I think you might be interested in, and brought me into the Shalom Zone. And I think that's where I started getting really connected to the greater Westminster community. That led me to connect to the Boys and Girls Club. And since that time, I've become very involved in United Way of Central Maryland. I've been the chair of the Carroll County Partnership Board for, I think, about 6 years now. Been on the main board of United Way for quite a while. And also for a number of years, I was involved with Interfaith Housing Alliance. They're based in Frederick, and I was just having trouble juggling my schedule at that point to stay on their board. But I think that those are the primary boards that I've been on, and have seen, I think, all sorts of good things and growth and opportunities and very positive social change through my involvement in all of those organizations.
How do you see McDaniel fitting in with the whole Carroll County community mold?
I think we're starting to do a better job, and I'll give a little credit to myself that in the early 2000s, as I was getting involved with the Boys and Girls Club and Shalom Zone, I actually got up in a faculty meeting and said that McDaniel and the Union Street Methodist Church had a long association and relationship. Ironically, most of that relationship was supported by the Union Street Methodist Church and not by the college. The church was a sanctuary in the fullest sense of the word, was really a home away from home for many of our African American students, and they were very intentional about it. It wasn't just if the students could find them but they would actually do outreach programs to our students on campus and provide them with very often just a home atmosphere that was they could provide those students with an atmosphere, an environment that was much more like the homes they were coming from than the experience they had at McDaniel College. And I thought that was kind of ironic that with all the resources that we had at McDaniel, that we were being supported by arguably at least the poorest section of town. And I wanted to change that. And I wanted us to get involved with the Boys and Girls Club. And I think it was in 2004, I had an afternoon where I brought up all the kids from the Boys and Girls Club, and they were still working out of Union Street Methodist Church at that time, onto campus, and we did a tour of the campus and saw some rooms and classrooms and talked to students. And the highlight of it was they got to eat a meal in our dining facility, and the kids could not believe that at one meal they could have a hot dog, a hamburger, pizza, and French fries, not to mention soft serve ice cream, and many of them had it all. But for me, it was this wonderful. I thought I had a piece in opening up a world to these kids that, even though it was in some cases just 100 yards away from where they lived, a world they really knew nothing about, and certainly never thought that they could ever be part of that world. And we were trying to get a message starting even in the elementary grades that no, this is something that actually you can be part of. There are all sorts of ways that you could wind up in this college or a place like this college. And again, I'll give myself a little credit. I think I was sort of leading that charge largely by myself in the early 2000s to a point today where there is a formal partnership between McDaniel and the Boys and Girls Club of Westminster. You cannot go down during the operations of the Boys and Girls Club without seeing students from McDaniel down there. I mean, there just are dozens of students that are involved every semester. We just had the Christmas party for the Boys and Girls Club here at our dining facility, and through fundraising on the McDaniel campus, presented every member of the Boys and Girls Club with a hoodie. That I may even have their name on each one, but it was very cool.
And is this the mentoring program that you helped create?
Now the mentoring program, again, that starts to get, that sort of was an offshoot of just I wanted the college to take some ownership of what was going on, and I think over the years that's what's happened.
Wonderful. You've talked about it a couple times. Can you tell me a little bit about this Shalom Zone?
Yes, Shalom Zone actually. When I was at the Boys and Girls Club party a few days ago, I said, "Did you know that the roots of the Boys and Girls Club stem from Rodney King?" And it does, because after the riots that broke out with Rodney King and the testimony and all this kind of stuff, the United Methodist Church felt that there needed to be active programs that would be preventative, but sort of crisis prevention from this kind of obviously underlying discontent and disenfranchisement. And as much as 2 years later, with O.J. Simpson and at least the white community I found was saying, this is not about race, this is about murder. And I thought, what do you mean it's not about race? It's completely about race. It doesn't matter what the actual crime was. It's breaking down in black and white in terms of the perception of what happened. And that doesn't say we have a racial divide in this country. And that, again, there's just so much underlying anger and discontent and what I would call marginalization and being disenfranchised. And the Shalom Zone was the United Methodist Church program to answer that. And in the late 90s, the Union Street Methodist Church I think they got a small grant. I think there was grant money that was available to start doing this kind of, I guess programming is the right word. It really had a lot to do with community members coming together and doing it at one level or another needs assessment. And again, I really like to give a lot of credit to Howard Hinton, he was just an interim pastor of United Street Methodist Church, but I just found him to be a really powerful, again, just really focused on what I would term social justice and trying to make the church a real center point of that in this community. And I think one of the needs that came through the assessments that the Shalom Zone did was that there were a lot of kids, particularly in the community right here, right next to the college, who had perhaps less than satisfactory environments after school, often because there were no adults at home, or in some cases the adults that were around were not necessarily the best people to be around, and yet there were really very few resources or supports for those students. And I think that was really the genesis of the Boys and Girls Club.
Wonderful. Sounds like you're very involved and invested in this community.
I try to be.
Well, it makes a good partnership with school and everything. Can you tell me a little bit more about your the band?
Sure.
Say it one more time so I know.
It's Sang Malay.
Sang Malay.
And when I first came to Carroll County, I played sporadically, never really got anything going that did a lot for me. I would play in the pit in musical productions here. I'd actually, that was a steady gig that I had at times in New Orleans, was working in a dinner theater. But in 1997, I got to know Walt, and I said to him I was looking to try to put together some kind of acoustic blues trio, and he said, "Oh, I've got just the singer for you." And we got together at Walt's house, and I don't know that Walt had been planning at that point to embark upon this himself. He's pretty busy with a lot of his own projects. But the first night we played together, we thought, boy, this is cool, we've got something here. And in not too long, we called ourselves Sang Malay, which is patois it's actually from Haiti, and it means mixed blood. And we thought we were a pretty good representation of mixed blood, with Walt and I being the token Anglos, and Leo Gilmore, African American, and again with this great gospel blues background. Really a very well-known singer in the Baltimore area, who actually spends just about half her time performing in Europe these days. And we began Sang Malay, wanted to do a lot of traditional women in the blues music, which is really pretty raunchy stuff. It goes a little bit beyond PG-13. There's a lot of R-rated kind of stuff, and I was very happy doing that. But somehow, I'm not quite sure how this all happened, we started doing music in the schools, and the agency got interested in us, and we started doing a lot of school gigs, and kind of reframed what we did as a music education about American roots music and the blues and gospel. And in fact, I remember once, after performing in Montgomery County and ending with either Amazing Grace or some spiritual, and one of the teachers or administrators interviewing Leah and saying, we have a secular school system, and we can't have prayer and stuff in school, and how do you sort of see what you're doing? And she said, "This is history education about music, and in this music we call out God." And that worked. And so that's, as long as we could say this is education, we could do gospel and spirituals, and believe me, there's no reason to play that music if you don't feel the spirit when you play it. And one of the things I love about playing with Leah is, particularly when we would do something like Precious Lord, which we do as a blues, and she was announced it was Martin Luther King's favorite song. And as she would sing it, and as she does sing it, tears start coming down her. I mean, she's just soaking in tears. And there were any number of moments that just in the moment I found myself, I would have tears coming down. And not for, you can't say why that's happening. Something beyond the music starts happening. So to be able to start with a raunchy blues band and wind up sort of doing that and somehow making it all come together, and then we played a lot of festivals and colleges and so on, where we'd sort of blend the two things together. And we've not been playing regularly for a number of years. But we actually have a booking in March at Cranberry Station Elementary School right here in Westminster, because we played it there a number of years ago, and the principal called and said, "Do you still have Sang Malay?" And I said, "If you have a gig, we have Sang Malay." So that will be 2012. So we'll be hitting 15 years as in one way or other as a functioning band at that point.
That's great. Well, I was going to ask where people can see and hear you guys play. Do you play outside of school still, or not?
As Sang Malay, we don't do a lot. I play with Leah a few times every year. We always play at Common Ground. Mm-hmm. We always do, most of the music that I do now, I do play with Common Ground, and I spot with various bands. I actually have a band with my son, who's 16 years old. He's a very good drummer, and we use a keyboard player who actually is a student at McDaniel that I didn't know at the time. I gigged with him, didn't realize he was a student here. So their two ages combined don't come close to mine. But last week I played a gig with the Never Too Late Band, which is a swing band out of Carroll Lutheran Village, where I was the kid in that band. So I have a fair amount of range of things that I do. I'm very involved with Common Ground. I always do their blues night, playing the band for the gospel choir, and have started to parlay a program or a class that I teach called Music from the Big Easy, which is about New Orleans rhythm and blues, to a point where we've done a couple of gigs now with local people that have networked through that class, so that we actually have a band that we do New Orleans rhythm and blues. We just played for the ball for the Realtors Foundation for their big fundraiser for Access Carol. So that was, and I thought a masquerade ball, that's perfect for a New Orleans style band. I think we're going to call ourselves Music from the Big Sleazy, but I'm not quite sure what people think about that.
Well, great. Well, it seems like you've had a lot of great stories to tell, and I appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to add or share with me today about Carroll County or McDaniel?
I'll say about, I think where I got to a point where it's very hard to imagine leaving Westminster or Carroll County is when we moved to West Green Street. I'm a 10-minute walk from my office. I'm a 5-minute walk from the Arts Council, from Harry's, from 10 minutes from the library, 10 minutes from Coffee Music. I play at the Bluegrass Jam on the first and third Friday of the month. Love doing that. Love being connected downtown. Love being connected to the college and being able to walk around. As I said, I didn't expect to stay here, and I really didn't see myself living in Carroll County for the duration. I really did not, and I won't go into some of the stereotypes that built up, and probably that I still have. This sometimes is not the most progressive, broad-thinking community. I read the letters to the editor of the paper, the Carroll County Times, every day for my amusement and sometimes to my horror to see what's going on. But I have found this to be a wonderful community, and I feel like I know people from many different walks of life. My involvement with sort of philanthropical groups has been wonderful in terms of meeting, as I said, all sorts of members of this community. I've raised my children here. They don't know any other place, and it's just gotten to the point where I can't imagine living in other place. And I just, so somebody who went from California to Connecticut to New Jersey to Louisiana to Carroll County, being in Carroll County, I can't imagine living anyplace else.
Well, I think we'll end there. That was a great way to sum up Carroll County, I think. And I want to thank you for sharing your memories with us today.
Thank you for asking.